The earth trembled beneath Tabitha Wilson's feet, but it wasn't from a stampede of wild horses or the rumble of an approaching storm. It was the violent shaking of her own body as she sobbed over the tiny grave, the third she had dug in as many years. The harsh Dakota Territory wind whipped across the barren prairie, carrying her cries into the vast nothingness that surrounded the small homestead she shared with her husband's family. It was 1878, and life in the Dakota Territory was unforgiving enough without the weight of failure that Tabitha carried. At 23, she had buried 3 babies, none surviving past their second month. With each loss, the whispers from her husband's family grew louder, their accusations more pointed. "She's cursed," her mother-in-law Martha Wilson had declared after the third tiny pine box was lowered into the hard ground. "No woman loses 3 babies without the devil's hand upon her." Tabitha's husband Robert, a man once filled with dreams and tenderness, now avoided her eyes. He spent more time at the saloon in the nearest settlement, returning with whiskey on his breath and disappointment in his gaze. Their marriage, once built on youthful love and hope for a prosperous future on the frontier, was as dry and cracked as the drought-stricken land. "Tabitha," her father-in-law's voice cut through her grief. "The wagon's packed. You and Robert should head out at dawn." She wiped her tears, standing on shaky legs beside the small wooden cross that marked her latest loss. "Head out where, Mr. Wilson?" "Back east to your people. This land's too harsh for someone." He hesitated, his weathered face pinched with discomfort. "Someone with your affliction." "My affliction?" The words came out as a whisper. "Your curse," Martha Wilson said bluntly, stepping forward from the shadow of the small farmhouse. 3 dead babies. The neighbors talk. They're starting to avoid our farm, afraid of what might spread to their children." Tabitha stared at the older woman, her grief momentarily eclipsed by shock. "Spread? Like a disease?" "Like bad fortune," Martha clarified. "Like a curse that follows you and touches everything around you." That night, as Tabitha lay beside her distant husband in their narrow bed, she whispered, "Do you believe I'm cursed, Robert?" He was silent for so long that she thought he had fallen asleep. Finally, he spoke, his voice hollow in the darkness. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Tabby. But Ma's right about one thing: we can't stay here." "Where would we go?" "Not we," he said, and the finality in his voice made her blood run cold. "I'm staying to help Pa with the farm. You'll go to your sisters in Park City. Utah Territory's growing fast. Maybe you can make a fresh start there." "You're sending me away." Tabitha sat up, her heart pounding. "Without you, Robert wouldn't meet her eyes. It's better this way. We both know it." 2 days later, Tabitha found herself on the westbound train, a small trunk of possessions at her feet and divorce papers in her bag. Robert hadn't even come to see her off, leaving that task to his stone-faced father, who had pressed a small purse of coins into her hand with the muttered words, "For your trouble." As if losing 3 babies and a husband could be compensated with a handful of silver. The journey west was long and grueling, the train's relentless rhythm a constant reminder of her heartbeat alone, but still going. Tabitha spent most of the trip staring out the window, watching the landscape change from the rolling prairies of the Dakota Territory to the jagged mountains that marked the approach to Utah Territory. Her sister's letter had been warm and welcoming, assuring Tabitha that there was room in her small home in Park City, a silver mining town nestled in the mountains. Catherine had married a mine supervisor and moved west 5 years earlier, writing of the opportunities in the booming town. When the train finally pulled into the station in Salt Lake City, Tabitha gathered her meager belongings and prepared for the final leg of her journey, a stagecoach ride up into the mountains to Park City. The stagecoach office was crowded with travelers, miners, and freight agents. Tabitha stood in line, clutching her ticket and feeling increasingly out of place in her plain gray traveling dress. "Next," called the ticket agent, and Tabitha stepped forward. "One passage to Park City, please. I believe it departs at noon." The agent, a balding man with ink-stained fingers, shook his head. "Noon coach is full up, madam. Next one's tomorrow morning." Tabitha felt a wave of despair. She had nowhere to stay and her funds were limited. "I must get to Park City today. My sister is expecting me." "Sorry, madam." "Unless someone gives up their seat." "There's no, she can have my spot," came a deep voice from behind her. Tabitha turned to find herself looking up at a tall man in a dusty black hat. His face was tanned from the sun, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. He wore the practical clothes of a working man: sturdy trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest. "That's not necessary," Tabitha started to say, but the man shook his head. "I've got business that can wait till tomorrow," he said, tipping his hat to her. "Name's Xavier Zimmerman, madam." "Most folks call me XZ. Tabitha Wilson," she replied automatically. "But I cannot accept." "You can and you will," XZ said with an easy smile that reached his eyes. "I've been on the trail for 2 weeks. One more night in a real bed before heading up to Park City won't hurt me none." Before she could protest further, he had arranged the ticket exchange with the agent and tipped his hat to her again. "Safe travels, Mrs. Wilson. Park City's a good town, despite what some might say." With that cryptic remark, he turned and walked away, leaving Tabitha staring after him, a strange feeling of warmth spreading through her chest for the first time in months. The stagecoach journey to Park City was arduous, the road winding up through mountain passes and along precarious ledges that made Tabitha's stomach lurch. Her fellow passengers were a mix of miners, a saloon girl returning from a shopping trip in Salt Lake City, and a nervous-looking banker clutching his leather satchel. As the coach climbed higher into the mountains, one of the miners, a gray-bearded man with kind eyes, noticed Tabitha's white-knuckled grip on the seat. "First time to Park City, madam," Tabitha nodded. "I'm visiting my sister, Catherine Brooks. Her husband works at the Ontario mine." The miner's face brightened. "Ah, Brooks, good man, fair supervisor. You'll be well looked after then." Something in his tone made Tabitha pause. "Is there a reason I wouldn't be?" The miner and the saloon girl exchanged glances. "Park City's booming," the girl said carefully, adjusting her feathered hat. "But boom towns attract all sorts." "All sorts?" "Roughnecks," the miner explained. "Claim jumpers. Men looking to make quick money off others' hard work. And where there's men like that, there's trouble." The banker cleared his throat. "I'm sure Mrs. Wilson's brother-in-law will ensure her safety. The Ontario mine compound is well protected." The conversation drifted to other topics, but Tabitha's mind lingered on their words. She had left one troubled situation only to perhaps find herself in another. Still, the thought of seeing Catherine after so many years brought a genuine smile to her face. The stagecoach rolled into Park City just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows between the buildings that lined the main street. Tabitha was struck by how much larger the town was than she had imagined. Wooden buildings stretched along both sides of the street, with the imposing structures of the mines visible on the hillsides beyond. "Catherine," Tabitha called out, spotting her sister waiting near the stagecoach stop. The women embraced, tears flowing freely as they held each other for the first time in nearly 6 years. "Let me look at you," Catherine said, holding Tabitha at arm's length. Her sister's once plump face had thinned, and her blue eyes held a wariness that hadn't been there when Tabitha had waved goodbye on her wedding day. "You're so pale. Was the journey terrible?" "Just long," Tabitha assured her, not wanting to burden her sister immediately with the full weight of her troubles. "How are you? And James?" Catherine's smile faltered slightly. "James is well, working hard. The Ontario's producing record silver, and he's been promoted twice in the last year." They walked arm in arm down the bustling Main Street, Catherine pointing out the important buildings, the assay office, the bank, the general store, and, of course, the saloons and gaming halls that service the miners. "It's lively," Tabitha observed, taking in the piano music spilling from an establishment called the Silver Strike. "That's one word for it," Catherine replied with a tight smile. "Park City never truly sleeps. The mines run day and night shifts." As they turned onto a side street, Tabitha noticed that the houses here were larger and better maintained, with small gardens and painted fences. Catherine's home was at the end of the row, a neat two-story house with green shutters and a small porch. "It's lovely," Tabitha said sincerely. Catherine had done well for herself. "It's home," Catherine replied, opening the door. "James should be back from the mine soon. Let's get you settled." Inside, the house was comfortably furnished, with a parlor containing overstuffed chairs and a small, upright piano, a dining room with a polished oak table, and a kitchen where a pot of something fragrant simmered on the stove. "Your room is upstairs, the second door on the right," Catherine said, taking Tabitha's coat. "Go freshen up. Dinner will be ready when James arrives." Alone in the small but comfortable guest room, Tabitha sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of her journey. She was hundreds of miles from the farm where she had buried her babies, divorced by a husband who couldn't bear the sight of her grief, and branded as cursed by her in-laws. She washed her face in the basin provided, changed into a fresh dress, and pinned her dark hair back neatly. In the small mirror above the washstand, she hardly recognized herself. Her once vibrant green eyes were dull, and her skin had a grayish cast. Perhaps her mother-in-law was right, perhaps she was cursed. The sound of the front door opening, and a man's voice calling out Catherine's name broke into her thoughts. Taking a deep breath, Tabitha headed downstairs to meet her brother-in-law. James Brooks was a tall, serious man with spectacles and a neatly trimmed beard. He greeted Tabitha cordially, if somewhat distantly, and conversation over dinner was polite but strained. Tabitha noticed the way Catherine deferred to her husband on every subject, how she jumped to refill his coffee cup before it was empty, how her laughter seemed forced when he made what passed for a joke. After dinner, when James retired to his study with a ledger book, Catherine finally asked the question Tabitha had been dreading. "What really happened, Tabby? Your letter said only that you and Robert had parted ways." Seated in the parlor with cups of tea, Tabitha found the words spilling out, the babies, the accusations, the divorce papers thrust into her hands. Catherine's face paled as she listened. "Cursed? They called you cursed?" Catherine shook her head in disbelief. "That's superstitious nonsense." "3 babies, Kath," Tabitha whispered. "All born healthy, all dead within weeks. What would you call it?" Catherine reached for her sister's hand. "Tragic, heartbreaking, but not a curse. These things happen, Tabby, especially out there on the frontier with no proper doctor." Tabitha squeezed her sister's hand gratefully. "Robert's mother convinced him, said no man should have to bear a barren wife." "You're not barren, you carried 3 children, to the grave," Tabitha said bitterly. Catherine set down her teacup with a decisive clink. "Listen to me. You're here now with family who loves you. Park City is growing. There are opportunities for a woman with your skills." "My skills?" Tabitha asked skeptically. "You were always the best seamstress in the county. There's not a proper dressmaker in Park City, yet just old Mrs. Flannery who can barely thread a needle these days. You could open a shop." The idea was so unexpected that Tabitha nearly laughed. A shop? Me? Why not? James knows people at the bank. We could arrange a small loan for the initial supplies. From the study came the sound of a throat clearing. James stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Catherine!" A word. Tabitha watched her sister follow her husband back to his study, the door closing firmly behind them. Though she couldn't make out the words, the tone of their conversation was clear. James's voice low and insistent, Catherine's increasingly pleading. When Catherine returned to the parlor, her eyes were red-rimmed, but she forced a smile. "James thinks it's best if we wait a bit before discussing business matters. Let you settle in first." Tabitha nodded, understanding the unspoken message. James Brooks was not as enthusiastic about his sister-in-law's indefinite stay as Catherine had implied. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, Tabitha stared at the ceiling and wondered if she had traded one form of rejection for another. The thought of becoming a burden to her sister filled her with dread. The next morning, after a breakfast during which James barely acknowledged her presence before leaving for the mine, Tabitha made her decision. "I need to find work, Kath. Right away." Catherine looked up from clearing the breakfast dishes. "James says—" "I don't care what James says," Tabitha interrupted, immediately regretting her harshness when she saw Catherine flinch. More gently, she added, "I appreciate your hospitality truly, but I need my independence." Catherine sighed. "There aren't many respectable positions for a woman in Park City." "Then I'll take what's available," Tabitha said firmly. "I can cook, clean, so I'm not afraid of hard work." After some discussion, they agreed that Tabitha would inquire at the hotel about housekeeping positions, and at the general store about any sewing work. Catherine insisted on accompanying her, clearly concerned about her sister venturing into town alone. Park City by daylight was even more chaotic than it had appeared the previous evening. Wagons loaded with ore rumbled down from the mines, while supply carts made their way up the steep streets. Men in varying states of cleanliness moved purposefully between the businesses, and a few women, most dressed in the flashy attire of saloon girls, navigated the uneven boardwalks. The Grand Hotel, the largest building on Main Street, was their first stop. The manager, a harried-looking man named Peterson, barely looked at Tabitha as he dismissed her inquiry. "No positions. Filled our last vacancy yesterday." "But surely with all the guests," Catherine began. "No positions," he repeated firmly, turning away to deal with a complaining guest. The general store was more welcoming, but the owner, Mrs. Thorndyke, regretfully explained that she had already engaged a seamstress for alterations. "You might try the boarding house on Pine Street," she suggested kindly. "Mrs. Haggerty's always looking for help with the cooking and cleaning." By midday, Tabitha had been turned away from 6 potential employers. At each place, there was an exchange of glances, a whispered consultation, and then a polite but firm refusal. "What's happening?" Tabitha asked her sister as they left the baker's shop, where the owner had practically shooed them out the door. "It's as if they've been warned against me." Catherine's face was troubled. "James must have said something." "Said what?" "That I'm looking for work." "That you're divorced," Catherine whispered, pulling Tabitha into the shadow of an alleyway. "In a town like this, reputation is everything. A divorced woman is considered tainted." Tabitha felt the blood drain from her face. "You think James has been spreading rumors about me?" "Not rumors exactly, but he's an important man at the mine. People listen when he talks." Catherine looked miserable. He was concerned about his position, about how having a divorced sister-in-law might reflect on him. "So he's made sure no respectable business will hire me," Tabitha concluded, anger building inside her. "What am I supposed to do? Starve? "I'll talk to him," Catherine promised, but her eyes lacked conviction. "Maybe if I explain—" "Excuse me, ladies," a voice interrupted them. Both women turned to find a well-dressed older gentleman with silver hair and a carefully groomed mustache. "I couldn't help overhearing that you're seeking employment, young woman." Tabitha straightened her shoulders, suspicious of the man's interest. "I am Theodore Blackburn," he introduced himself with a slight bow. "I own the Silver Strike Saloon." Catherine immediately stepped forward, placing herself slightly in front of Tabitha. "My sister isn't looking for that kind of position, Mr. Blackburn." The man's eyebrows rose. "And what kind would that be, Mrs. Brooks?" "The saloon girl kind," Catherine said, her cheeks flushing. Mr. Blackburn chuckled. "I assure you, I'm offering nothing improper. My establishment includes a small restaurant that caters to the better class of miners and businessmen. I need someone to help with the cooking during the day shift. The hours are reasonable, the pay is fair, and you'd be finished before the evening crowd arrives." Tabitha and Catherine exchanged glances. "It's honest work," Mr. Blackburn continued. "And unlike some in this town, I don't concern myself with my employees' personal histories, only their ability to do the job." "I can cook," Tabitha said cautiously. "Excellent. Can you start tomorrow, 8 in the morning, through the back entrance on Miners Alley?" He tipped his hat. "Good day, ladies." As he walked away, Catherine turned to Tabitha with worried eyes. "A saloon, Tabby. James will never approve." "I'm not asking for James's approval," Tabitha replied, a new determination in her voice. "I'm asking for a chance to support myself. Mr. Blackburn is offering that." "But your reputation, my reputation." Tabitha laughed bitterly. "I've been divorced, labeled as cursed, and apparently blacklisted in half the businesses in town before I've even been here a full day. What's left to protect?" The hurt in Catherine's eyes made Tabitha regret her words. She softened her tone. "I appreciate your concern, truly, but I need this opportunity." That evening, dinner at the Brooks household was a tense affair. James was clearly displeased when informed of Tabitha's new position. "A saloon," he said, cutting his meat with precise, angry motions. "Catherine, did you not explain to your sister what sort of establishment the Silver Strike is?" "Mr. Blackburn assured us it's just kitchen work," Catherine said timidly. "During daylight hours. Blackburn is a shrewd businessman. He knows having a pretty face like your sister's around will draw customers." Tabitha set down her fork. "My face will be in the kitchen, Mr. Brooks, and I'd appreciate you discussing me as though I'm present." James looked at her directly for perhaps the first time since her arrival. "This position reflects poorly on our family, Mrs. Wilson. It's honest work, in a dishonest establishment." "James, please," Catherine interjected. "Tabitha needs what Tabitha needs," James said coldly, "is to understand how things work in Park City. Reputations matter. Connections matter. Your sister has already arrived under unfortunate circumstances. Working at Blackburn's will only cement her status as a woman of questionable character." Tabitha stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly on the wooden floor. "My character is not questionable, Mr. Brooks. I have endured loss and betrayal that would break many. I have traveled across half the country to start anew, and I will not sit here and be insulted in my sister's home." With that, she left the table and retreated to her room, her dinner half-eaten and her heart racing with anger. Later, Catherine came upstairs with a plate of food and an apology. "James means well," she said weakly. "He's concerned about appearances. More than he's concerned about your sister having a means to support herself," Tabitha observed. "What does he expect me to do, Kath? Live off your charity forever?" Catherine had no answer to that. The next morning, Tabitha rose early and dressed in her most practical dress. She left the house before James was awake, leaving a note for Catherine explaining that she would be home after her shift ended at 4 o'clock. The Silver Strike's kitchen entrance was just where Mr. Blackburn had said it would be, on the narrow alley behind the main street. Tabitha took a deep breath and knocked on the heavy wooden door. It was opened by a round woman with gray hair escaping from beneath a cook's cap. Her face was flushed from the heat of the large iron stove behind her. "You must be the new girl," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm Mrs. Potts. You're late." The position was for 8 o'clock, Tabitha said, glancing at the clock on the wall that showed it was only 1:45. "In my kitchen, on time is late," Mrs. Potts said firmly. "Get an apron from that hook and start peeling those potatoes. We've got miners coming in for breakfast in half an hour." The kitchen work was hard but straightforward. Tabitha peeled vegetables, kneaded dough, stirred massive pots of stew, and washed endless stacks of dishes. By midday, her back ached and her hands were raw, but there was a satisfaction in the work that she hadn't expected. Mr. Blackburn appeared briefly around noon, checking in on the kitchen's operations. He nodded approvingly at Tabitha's efforts. "You're doing well, Mrs. Wilson. Mrs. Potts is not easy to impress." The older woman snorted at this, but didn't contradict him. As promised, Tabitha's shift ended at 4 o'clock, before the saloon's evening business began in earnest. She removed her apron, collected her first day's wages more generous than she had expected, and headed for the back door. "Same time tomorrow," Mrs. Potts called after her. "And by same time, I mean half an hour earlier than you arrived today." Tabitha smiled despite her exhaustion. "Yes, Mrs. Potts." She stepped out into the alley, blinking in the late afternoon sunlight, and nearly collided with a tall figure leaning against the opposite wall. "Careful there, Mrs. Wilson," said a familiar voice. Tabitha looked up to find Xavier Zimmerman XZ tipping his hat to her, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Mr. Zimmerman," she acknowledged, surprised. "You made it to Park City after all." "Just this morning," he confirmed. "Had some business with Theodore Blackburn." "You know Mr. Blackburn?" XZ nodded. "Most folks in these parts do. He's got his fingers in a lot of Pye's mining claims, freight contracts, the saloon. You working for him now?" "In the kitchen," Tabitha said defensively. "It's respectable work." "Never suggested otherwise," XZ said, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "Blackburn runs a clean establishment, as such places go." They began walking together toward the main street, Tabitha suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look after hours in the hot kitchen. "So what brings you to Park City, Mrs. Wilson, if you don't mind my asking?" Tabitha hesitated. "I'm visiting my sister and her husband." XZ nodded, seemingly accepting this partial truth. "And kitchen work is just to pass the time, something like that." They reached the corner where the alley met Main Street, and Tabitha expected they would part ways. Instead, XZ fell into step beside her. "Allow me to escort you home," he said. "Some of the miners get rowdy this time of day, catching a drink between shifts." "That's not necessary," Tabitha protested. "I'm perfectly capable, never said you weren't," XZ interrupted with an easy smile. "But my mama raised me to see a lady safely home when the opportunity presents itself." Tabitha found herself returning his smile despite her fatigue. "Very well, Mr. Zimmerman. I'm staying with my sister on Pine Street." They walked in comfortable silence for a few moments before XZ spoke again. "You know, folks around here call me XZ. Mr. Zimmerman was my father." "Is that so, Mr. Zimmerman?" Tabitha replied, a hint of teasing in her voice. He laughed, a rich sound that drew the attention of passers-by. "Stubborn woman. How was your first day with Mrs. Potts?" "Exhausting," Tabitha admitted, "but satisfying. She's the best cook in 3 counties. You'll learn a lot from her." As they approached Catherine Street, Tabitha slowed her steps. "This is far enough, thank you. My brother-in-law might not. That is, he's particular about appearances." XZ's eyes narrowed slightly. "Brooks, the Ontario mine supervisor," Tabitha nodded. "Ah, man with a reputation to protect." There was something in XZ's tone that suggested he knew more about James Brooks than he was saying. "He's been good to my sister," Tabitha said loyally, though the words felt hollow given James's behavior toward her. "I'm sure he has." XZ tipped his hat again. "Well, Mrs. Wilson, it was a pleasure walking with you. Perhaps I'll see you around town." "Perhaps," Tabitha agreed, though she doubted their paths would cross again. A man like Xavier Zimmerman, clearly respected and established in the community, would have little reason to associate with a divorced woman working in a saloon kitchen. She watched him walk away, his tall figure moving easily through the crowd on Main Street. There was something compelling about him, a quiet confidence that seemed to come from within, rather than from his position or possessions. Pushing the thought aside, Tabitha turned and walked the remaining distance to Catherine's house, steeling herself for another uncomfortable evening with her disapproving brother-in-law. To her surprise, the house was empty when she arrived. A note from Catherine on the kitchen table explained that she and James had been invited to dinner at the mine manager's home and would return late. Relieved to have the house to herself, Tabitha prepared a simple meal from the contents of Catherine's pantry, bathed away the kitchen grime, and settled in the parlor with a book she had found on a small shelf. The quiet evening was a balm after the chaos of the day. The following weeks fell into a pattern. Tabitha would rise before dawn, walk to the Silver Strike, and spend her days in Mrs. Potts's kitchen. The work was hard, but she found satisfaction in mastering new recipes and earning praise from the older woman, who rarely complimented anyone. At home, things were strained. James continued to express his disapproval of her employment, and Catherine was increasingly caught in the middle, torn between loyalty to her husband and love for her sister. Tabitha began to save her wages, determined to find her own lodgings as soon as possible. She occasionally saw XZ around town, and he always tipped his hat to her or stopped for a brief conversation. She learned that he owned a small ranch just outside of Park City, as well as interests in several mining claims. He was respected in the community, and even James seemed to acknowledge him with grudging deference when their paths crossed on Main Street. One afternoon, about a month after Tabitha had started working at the Silver Strike, Mr. Blackburn stopped by the kitchen as she was preparing to leave. "Mrs. Wilson, a word." He gestured for her to follow him to his small office off the main dining room. Once there, he closed the door and offered her a seat. "Mrs. Potts speaks highly of your work." "Thank you, sir. I have a proposition for you." As you may have noticed, the dining room has become increasingly popular for lunch service. Tabitha nodded. The quality of Mrs. Potts's cooking had attracted a steady clientele of businessmen and the better class of miners. "I'm considering expanding the hours to include a proper dinner service," Mr. Blackburn continued. "Nothing elaborate, but a few good dishes to complement the drinks. Mrs. Potts cannot work longer hours due to her health, and I need someone reliable to manage the evening kitchen." "You want me to cook for the evening service?" Tabitha asked, surprised. "With a significant increase in wages, of course. The hours would be longer, noon until 8 or 9. You'd have mornings free." The offer was tempting. The increased wages would allow her to save for her own place much faster. But evening work at the saloon would be the final blow to her already tenuous reputation in town. "May I have some time to consider it?" she asked. Mr. Blackburn nodded. "Take until tomorrow. But I should warn you if you decline. I'll need to hire someone else quickly. I can't guarantee your current position would remain available." Understanding the implied ultimatum, Tabitha left the saloon with a heavy heart. The decision before her seemed impossible: accept the promotion and risk complete social ostracism, or decline and possibly lose her only means of support. Lost in thought, she didn't notice the commotion on Main Street until she was nearly in the middle of it. A crowd had gathered around two men facing off in the dusty road, one of whom she recognized as XZ. The other was a burly miner with a wild beard and bloodshot eyes. "You cheated me, Zimmerman," the miner was shouting, his hand hovering near the gun at his hip. "Nobody gets that lucky at cards." XZ's posture was relaxed, but Tabitha could see the alertness in his eyes. "You lost fair and square, Jenkins. Go sleep it off." "I want my money back." Jenkins's hand inched closer to his gun. Without thinking, Tabitha stepped forward. "Mr. Zimmerman." Both men turned at the sound of her voice. XZ's expression changed from alert caution to alarm. "Mrs. Wilson, step back," he said firmly, but her interruption had broken the tension. Jenkins, distracted by the appearance of a woman, hesitated long enough for the town marshal to push through the crowd. "That's enough, Jenkins," the marshal said, his hand on his own weapon. "You're drunk. Time to cool off in a cell." The miner glared but allowed himself to be led away, muttering threats as he went. The crowd dispersed, leaving Tabitha standing in the street with XZ, who looked at her with a mixture of exasperation and admiration. "That was either very brave or very foolish, Mrs. Wilson." "I didn't think," she admitted. "I just saw you in danger and decided to put yourself in harm's way." He shook his head. "Jenkins is harmless when sober, but liquored up, he's unpredictable." "I'm sorry if I interfered." XZ's expression softened. "No need to apologize. Your timing may have prevented bloodshed. Allow me to thank you properly. Have dinner with me this evening." The unexpected invitation left Tabitha momentarily speechless. "Dinner with you, unless you have other plans." There was a hint of teasing in his voice. "No, That is, I should inform my sister." "Of course. Shall I call for you at 7, at the Brooks residence?" Tabitha imagined James's reaction to having Xavier Zimmerman appear at his front door, asking for his divorced sister-in-law. "Perhaps I could meet you instead, at the restaurant." Understanding flickered in XZ's eyes. "The Western House Hotel has a decent dining room. 7 o'clock, Tabitha nodded, suddenly feeling nervous in a way that had nothing to do with near-miss gunfights. 7 o'clock. Back at Catherine's house, Tabitha found her sister mending a shirt in the parlor. James, thankfully, was still at the mine. "Kath, I've been invited to dinner this evening," Tabitha said, trying to sound casual. Catherine looked up in surprise. "Dinner with whom?" "Xavier Zimmerman." "The rancher," Catherine set aside her mending. "Tabby, are you sure that's wise? He has a certain reputation." "What sort of reputation?" Tabitha asked defensively. Catherine hesitated. "He's a gambler, and James says he's been involved in some questionable business deals." "James seems to have opinions about everyone in town," Tabitha observed dryly. "He knows people," Catherine insisted. "And he says Zimmerman isn't the sort of man a respectable woman associates with." "Well, according to James, I'm not a respectable woman anymore," Tabitha retorted. "So perhaps Mr. Zimmerman and I are well matched." Catherine's face fell. "You know I don't think that way." Immediately regretting her harsh words, Tabitha sat beside her sister and took her hand. "I know, Kath, I'm sorry, but I'm a grown woman, divorced and employed in a saloon kitchen. Surely having dinner with a man who's shown me nothing but kindness can't worsen my standing. James will be furious." "Then don't tell him," Tabitha suggested. "I'll be back before he returns from his meeting at the mine." After some discussion, Catherine reluctantly agreed to cover for Tabitha's absence if James returned early. Tabitha changed into her best dress, a dark blue wool that brought out the green in her eyes, and arranged her hair more carefully than she had in months. Looking in the mirror, she was surprised to see color in her cheeks and a brightness in her eyes that had been missing since before her last baby's death. The thought of her lost children brought a momentary pang, but it wasn't accompanied by the crushing despair she had grown accustomed to. The Western House Hotel was the second finest establishment in Park City, catering to visiting businessmen and the occasional tourist. Its dining room was small but elegantly appointed with white tablecloths and silver cutlery. XZ was waiting for her in the lobby, dressed in a clean shirt and vest, his usually dusty hat nowhere to be seen. His dark hair was neatly combed and he had trimmed his beard. The effect was striking. He was a handsome man when cleaned up. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, stepping forward to greet her. "You look lovely." "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy. "And please call me Tabitha." "Tabitha," he repeated, as if testing the name. "Shall we?" The maitre d' led them to a quiet table in the corner of the dining room. XZ held Tabitha's chair for her, and once they were seated, ordered a bottle of wine. "I hope you don't mind," he said. "The chicken here is excellent, but it needs something to complement it." "Not at all," Tabitha replied, though she rarely drank. Robert had disapproved of women drinking alcohol. The conversation flowed easily. XZ told her about his ranch, how he had come to Park City 5 years earlier with little more than his horse and saddle, won a significant sum in a poker game, and invested it in a small piece of land outside town. "Lucky at cards, unlucky in love," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "Or so the saying goes." "And is that true for you?" Tabitha asked, surprising herself with her boldness. XZ considered the question. "I've had my share of both luck and misfortune. But I've never found someone who made me want to settle down properly. No family back east, none to speak of. My mother died when I was young, and my father and I never saw eye to eye. I left home at 16 and never looked back." He refilled their wine glasses. "What about you?" "You mentioned a sister, but what brought you to Park City?" Tabitha hesitated. The wine had loosened her tongue, but she was still wary of sharing her full story. "I was married. It ended badly." XZ nodded, not pressing for details. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Everyone has their sorrows," Tabitha said, attempting lightness, "but tonight is not for dwelling on them." "Indeed." XZ raised his glass. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," she echoed, touched by his understanding. They talked through dinner about lighter topics, books they had read, places they had seen, the future of Park City as the mines continued to produce record amounts of silver. XZ was well-informed and articulate, challenging Tabitha's preconceived notions about men who made their living partially through gambling. As they finished their dessert, a delicious apple tart, XZ broached a subject that had clearly been on his mind. "Tabitha, there's something I should tell you." "About your brother-in-law." She set down her fork, suddenly alert. "James, what about him?" XZ looked uncomfortable. "I've heard rumors about how he's been speaking about you around town. That I'm divorced, disgraced. I'm aware of his opinions. It's more than that." XZ leaned forward, lowering his voice. "He's been implying that your divorce was due to moral failings on your part." Tabitha felt the blood drain from her face. "Moral failings? That your husband found you with another man?" XZ's expression was grim. "It's why so many businesses turned you away. Not just because you're divorced, but because they believe you're adulterous." The accusation was so unexpected, so completely false, that Tabitha could only stare at him in shock. "That's absurd. I never. Robert divorced me because—" She stopped, unable to say the words aloud in the elegant dining room. "You don't need to explain," XZ said gently. "I'm telling you this because I thought you should know what you're facing." "Why would James say such things?" Tabitha whispered, hurt and confusion warring within her. "What have I ever done to him?" "Some men need to control their surroundings," XZ suggested. "Having a divorced sister-in-law living under his roof, seeking employment independently, it threatens his sense of order." "He wants me gone," Tabitha realized. "He's trying to make it impossible for me to stay in Park City." "It seems likely." Tabitha thought of her sister, trapped in a marriage to a man who would spread such vicious lies. Poor Catherine, she has no idea. Or perhaps she does, and that's why she's been helping you despite her husband's objections, XZ suggested. The possibility hadn't occurred to Tabitha. The thought that Catherine might be quietly defying James for her sake added a new layer of complexity to her situation. "I need to leave their house," she said decisively. "Find my own place to live." "That won't be easy," XZ cautioned. "Respectable boarding houses won't take you with your reputation, and the alternatives are not places you'd want to stay." "Mr. Blackburn offered me a promotion today," Tabitha said. "Evening cook with higher wages. I was hesitating because of how it would look, but now you have less to lose," XZ finished for her. "Exactly." Their conversation turned to practical matters where Tabitha might find lodging, how much it would cost, what precautions she would need to take living alone as a woman in a mining town. XZ offered advice without being patronizing, respecting her determination to make her own way. When they finally left the hotel, the night had grown cool and Tabitha shivered in her light shawl. Without comment, XZ removed his coat and placed it around her shoulders. The gesture was simple but filled with consideration. "I'll walk you home," he said. "Only to the corner," Tabitha insisted, thinking of James. XZ nodded, understanding. They walked in companionable silence through the quieter streets, the sounds of the saloons and gaming halls fading behind them. At the corner of Pine Street, they stopped. Tabitha removed his coat and handed it back to him. "Thank you for dinner," she said, "and for the warning about James." "I'm sorry it was necessary," XZ replied. In the moonlight, his face was shadowed, but Tabitha could feel his eyes on her. For a brief moment, she thought he might kiss her, and was startled to realize she wouldn't object if he did. Instead, he took her hand and pressed it briefly. "Good night, Tabitha. Be careful." "Good night, XZ." She watched him walk away before turning toward Catherine's house, her mind racing with all she had learned. One thing was certain: she could not stay under James Brooks's roof any longer. The house was dark when she arrived, suggesting that both Catherine and James were already asleep. Relieved, Tabitha slipped in quietly and made her way upstairs. To her surprise, a lamp burned low in her bedroom, and Catherine sat waiting on the edge of the bed. "Thank goodness you're back," Catherine whispered, rising to embrace her sister. "James returned early and was asking for you." "I said you had a headache and went to bed." "Thank you," Tabitha said, squeezing her sister's hands. "Kath, I need to tell you something." They sat together on the bed as Tabitha relayed what XZ had told her about James's rumors. Catherine's face grew paler with each word, but she didn't seem entirely surprised. "I suspected he was saying things," she admitted. "He's been so insistent that your presence would ruin his standing at the mine." "Why would he go to such lengths?" Catherine looked away. "James is very concerned with appearances. Having a divorced sister-in-law was bad enough, but when you took the position at the Silver Strike, he decided to make sure no one would associate with me," Tabitha concluded. "Kath, I can't stay here." "Where will you go?" "I don't know yet. But Mr. Blackburn offered me a better position today. I'm going to take it, save my wages, and find my own place as soon as possible." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Tabby. I never thought James would do something like this." "It's not your fault," Tabitha assured her, though she wondered how well Catherine really knew the man she had married. "But I need to be independent." "Whatever you decide, I'll support you," Catherine promised, embracing her sister again. The next morning, Tabitha left the house before James was awake, a note for Catherine explaining that she had gone to accept Mr. Blackburn's offer. At the Silver Strike, she found the owner in his office, reviewing accounts. "Mrs. Wilson," he greeted her, "have you considered my proposition?" "I have, and I accept," Tabitha said firmly. "When would you like me to start?" "Tomorrow, if possible. Mrs. Potts can show you the dinner preparations today during your regular shift." Tabitha hesitated. "Mr. Blackburn, there's something else. I'm looking for new lodgings. My current situation has become uncomfortable." The older man regarded her thoughtfully. "I see. That complicates matters. Respectable boarding houses are scarce in Park City, especially for a woman in your circumstances." "I'm aware," Tabitha said, lifting her chin. "But I'm determined to find something." Mr. Blackburn was silent for a moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. "My late sister's house stands empty on the edge of town. It's small and in need of some repairs, but the location is quiet and it's only a 10-minute walk from here." Tabitha stared at him in surprise. "You'd rent it to me, for a reasonable sum, deducted from your wages. The arrangement would benefit us both. You'd have a private residence, and I'd have someone looking after the property." The offer was unexpected but seemed like the answer to her prayers. "When could I move in?" "I'll have someone clean it today. You could take possession tomorrow." Mr. Blackburn hesitated. "I should warn you, Mrs. Wilson. Living alone as a divorced woman, working evening hours at a saloon, it won't improve your standing in town." "My standing can hardly get worse," Tabitha said dryly. "And I value my independence more than the opinions of people who would judge me without knowing my story." Mr. Blackburn smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his normally stern face. "I believe you'll do very well in Park City, Mrs. Wilson, despite what others may think." The next 24 hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. Tabitha spent her shift learning Mrs. Potts's dinner recipes and techniques, then returned to Catherine's to pack her few belongings. James was coldly furious when informed of her plans, barely maintaining a civil tone as he made it clear she would not be welcome to return. Catherine, caught between loyalty to her husband and love for her sister, cried as she helped Tabitha pack. "Promise you'll visit," she begged. "Don't let James's behavior keep us apart." "Never," Tabitha assured her. "We'll find ways to see each other." The following morning, Mr. Blackburn himself escorted Tabitha to her new home. The small house was indeed in need of repair. The porch sagged in one corner, and the paint was peeling, but it was clean and solidly built, with 2 small bedrooms, a kitchen, and a cozy parlor. "It's perfect," Tabitha said sincerely, already planning where to place the few pieces of furniture Mr. Blackburn had left for her use. "The roof is sound, and the stove works well," he said. "I'll send someone to fix the porch next week. In the meantime, be careful on that corner." That evening, Tabitha began her new role as the dinner cook at the Silver Strike. The kitchen was hot, the pace frantic, and the clientele more demanding than the lunch crowd, but she found she enjoyed the challenge. By closing time, she was exhausted but satisfied with her performance. As she left through the back door, she was startled to find XZ waiting in the alley, much as he had that first day. "Escorting me home again, Mr. Zimmerman?" she asked, too tired to be anything but direct. "If you'll allow it," he replied. "I heard you've moved to Blackburn's sister's place." "It's on the edge of town, not the safest area for a woman alone at night." Tabitha wanted to protest that she could manage on her own, but the truth was, she was grateful for his concern. "Thank you. It's very kind of you." They walked in comfortable silence, Tabitha leading the way to her new home. The streets grew quieter and darker as they left the main part of town behind, confirming the wisdom of accepting XZ's escort. "You look exhausted," he observed as they approached the small house. "First day as dinner cook," she explained. "It was intense. Blackburn drives a hard bargain, but he's fair. He wouldn't have offered you the position if he didn't think you could handle it." At her door, Tabitha hesitated, then made a decision. "Would you like to come in for coffee?" "It's the least I can offer for your trouble." XZ seemed surprised but pleased by the invitation. "I'd like that." Inside, Tabitha lit the lamps and set about making coffee on the small stove, acutely aware of how intimate it felt to have a man in her home. Robert had been the only man she'd ever entertained alone, and that had been as his wife. "It's a good house," XZ commented, looking around. "Solid construction. The roof sound, according to Mr. Blackburn." "He's right. I helped replace it 2 years ago after his sister passed." Tabitha handed him a cup of coffee. "You seem to know everyone in Park City." "It's a small town at heart, despite the boom," XZ said, accepting the cup. "People who have been here a while tend to look out for each other." They sat in the small parlor, the lamp casting warm light on XZ's face. In the intimate setting, Tabitha found herself studying him more closely, the laugh lines around his eyes, the strong line of his jaw, the capable hands that held the coffee cup. "Why did you really come to Park City?" he asked suddenly. The question caught her off guard. "I told you to visit my sister. And yet within a month, you're working at the Silver Strike and living alone. That's not the behavior of a woman on a family visit." Tabitha set down her cup, considering how much to reveal. Something about XZ made her want to trust him, despite Catherine's warnings about his reputation. "I was married," she began, "for 5 years. We had a farm in the Dakota Territory near my husband's parents." XZ listened quietly as she told her story, the 3 babies, each born healthy, each dying within weeks. The accusations of being cursed, Robert's growing distance, the divorce papers thrust into her hands. "His mother convinced him I was bad luck," she concluded, "that no man should have to bear a barren wife." "Barren?" XZ's voice held a note of disbelief. "You carried 3 children." "To the grave," Tabitha said, echoing her earlier words to Catherine. "Perhaps that's worse than barrenness." "It's not your fault," XZ said firmly. "Babies die. It's a hard truth, especially out on the frontier. There's no curse involved, just the cruelty of life." His blunt assessment was somehow more comforting than Catherine's gentle platitudes had been. "Robert's mother said differently, said the devil had marked me." "Superstitious nonsense," XZ scoffed. "From people who need to blame someone when bad things happen." "And you don't believe in such things?" Tabitha asked, curious. XZ set down his empty cup. "I believe in what I can see and touch, in people's actions, not in mystical forces or divine punishment. A practical man. A realistic one." His eyes held hers. "You're not cursed, Tabitha, not to me." The simple statement, echoing her thoughts from moments before, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. She looked away, embarrassed by her emotional response. XZ stood. "It's late and you've had a long day. I should go." At the door, he turned back. "Would it be presumptuous to ask if I might call on you properly? Perhaps Sunday afternoon," the formal request, so at odds with their unconventional meeting and relationship thus far, made Tabitha smile. "Not presumptuous at all. I'd like that. Until Sunday, then." He tipped his hat and disappeared into the darkness. Tabitha closed the door, leaning against it as a strange warmth spread through her chest. For the first time since losing her last baby, she felt something like hope. The following days fell into a new routine. Tabitha would spend her mornings attending to her small house cleaning, making minor repairs, and planting a few hardy flowers in the neglected front yard. In the afternoons, she would walk to the Silver Strike to prepare for the dinner service, working until late evening. XZ appeared each night to walk her home, a custom that quickly became the highlight of her day. Their conversations ranged from the mundane to the philosophical, and Tabitha found herself opening up to him in a way she had never done with Robert. On Sunday, as promised, XZ called formally, dressed in his best clothes and carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers. They walked together through the quieter parts of town, eventually finding a spot on a hillside overlooking the valley. "I never asked what you did before you married," XZ said as they sat on a fallen log. "I was a seamstress," Tabitha replied. "My father was the town tailor and I learned from him. After he died, I supported my mother and myself by sewing. You enjoyed it very much. There's something satisfying about creating something useful and beautiful from simple cloth." XZ nodded. "I understand. I feel the same way about working with horses, taking a wild, untrained animal and developing a partnership. You have horses at your ranch, a few good ones. I breed and train them when I'm not occupied with other business." He glanced at her. "Would you like to see them sometime?" The invitation seemed significant somehow, a step beyond their evening walks and Sunday afternoon conversations. "I would, very much." As summer turned to fall, Tabitha and XZ's relationship deepened. He began to tell her more about his past, his difficult childhood with an alcoholic father, his years drifting from town to town before finding his place in Park City. She, in turn, shared more about her marriage to Robert, how it had started with love but ended in pain and rejection. Catherine visited when James was away on mine business, bringing small gifts and news of town happenings. She seemed worried about Tabitha's growing relationship with XZ. "People talk, Tabby," she said during one such visit. "They say he's courting you. And if he is?" Tabitha replied, more defensively than she intended. "You're still legally married in the eyes of the church, even if the law says differently. And Zimmerman, he has a past." "We all have pasts," Tabitha pointed out. "Mine includes being called cursed and divorced by a husband who couldn't bear my grief." Catherine looked pained. "I just want you to be careful, to be sure." "I am careful," Tabitha assured her, "and XZ has been nothing but respectful." Despite Catherine's concerns, Tabitha found herself falling in love with Xavier Zimmerman. He was unlike any man she had known, confident without being overbearing, educated despite his lack of formal schooling, and most importantly, accepting of her exactly as she was. One crisp October Sunday, XZ took her to his ranch as he had promised months earlier. The small property was meticulously maintained, with a modest but comfortable house, a well-built barn, and corrals containing several fine horses. "It's lovely," Tabitha said sincerely, admiring the view of the mountains from his front porch. "It's home," XZ replied simply. "The first real one I've had." He showed her around the property, introduced her to his horses, and finally prepared a simple but delicious meal in his kitchen. "You cook," Tabitha observed, surprised. "A man who lives alone learns to fend for himself," XZ said with a smile, "though I don't claim to rival Mrs. Potts." After dinner, they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. There was a comfortable silence between them, the kind that comes only with deep understanding. "Tabitha," XZ said finally, turning to face her, "I've been meaning to ask you something." She looked at him, noting the uncharacteristic nervousness in his expression. "Yes." I'm not a man who believes in wasting time once I've made up my mind. He took her hands in his. These past months getting to know you have been the happiest of my life. Tabitha's heart began to race. Mine too. I know your past makes you cautious. I know you've been hurt, betrayed by someone who should have stood by you. His eyes held hers intently. I want you to know that I see you, all of you. Your strength, your kindness, your determination. And I don't see anything cursed or damaged or unworthy. Tears welled in Tabitha's eyes. XZ. Let me finish, he said gently. I love you, Tabitha Wilson. I want to marry you if you'll have me. Not just for companionship, though God knows I value that. Not just because you're beautiful, though you are. But because I believe we could build something real together, something that would withstand whatever life throws at us. The proposal was so unexpected, yet so perfectly right, that Tabitha couldn't speak for a moment. In the silence, doubt flickered across XZ's face. I understand if you need time to consider, he began. No, Tabitha interrupted, squeezing his hands. I don't need time. I love you too, XZ. I have for months, though I was afraid to admit it even to myself. Is that a yes? He asked, a smile beginning to spread across his face. Yes, she confirmed, laughing through her tears. Though I should warn you, people will talk. A divorced woman working in a saloon marrying a man with your reputation. Let them talk, XZ said dismissively. We know who we are. He leaned forward and kissed her, a gentle kiss that deepened as she responded. When they finally parted, both were breathless. There's something else you should know, Tabitha said, suddenly serious. The doctors in Dakota Territory could never explain why my babies died. It could happen again. XZ's expression was solemn. If it does, we'll face it together, and if it doesn't, we'll be grateful. Either way, Tabitha, I want a life with you, children or no children. His acceptance, so different from Robert's rejection, filled her with a joy she had thought she would never feel again. They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony at XZ's ranch, with Catherine as Tabitha's only attendant and Theodore Blackburn standing up for XZ. James Brooks did not attend, though Catherine assured Tabitha he had not forbidden her to come. Mr. Blackburn gave the bride away, a role he took on with surprising sentimentality. You remind me of my sister, he told Tabitha privately before the ceremony. Same spirit, same determination. Life as Mrs. Xavier Zimmerman was different in every way from Tabitha's previous marriage. They lived at XZ's ranch, and Tabitha continued to work at the Silver Strike until Christmas, when XZ suggested she might prefer to stay home and establish her sewing business again. The people in town know you now, he pointed out. They respect your work ethic, regardless of what Brooks might have said about you, and I've seen how you look at the fabric in the general store. Tabitha admitted her longing to return to sewing. With XZ's encouragement, she set up a small workspace in one of the ranch's spare rooms and began taking in mending jobs, gradually building a clientele that included some of the town's most respectable women. Winter passed in a haze of happiness. XZ and Tabitha settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both. They talked, laughed, argued occasionally, and made love with a passion that grew rather than diminished as the months passed. Spring came to the mountains, bringing wildflowers and new foals to the ranch. Tabitha discovered she was pregnant in April, a realization that filled her with both joy and terror. We'll get the best doctor in Salt Lake City, XZ promised when she told him, his face alight with happiness despite her fears. Whatever you need, whatever it takes. The pregnancy progressed normally through the summer and fall. Catherine visited often, her initial reservations about XZ melting away as she saw how devoted he was to Tabitha. Even James seemed to have softened his stance, nodding to XZ when they passed on Main Street. As her time grew near, Tabitha's fears intensified. She woke from nightmares of tiny coffins and freshly dug graves crying out in the darkness. XZ would hold her, his strong arms a shelter against her fears. "This time will be different," he would murmur. "You're not alone anymore." In November of 1879, Tabitha went into labor. XZ had arranged for the doctor from Salt Lake City to stay in Park City for the last 2 weeks of her pregnancy, and he was at the ranch within an hour of being summoned. The labor was long and difficult. XZ paced the ranch house, refusing Catherine's suggestions that he wait in town. "My place is here," he insisted, "as close to her as I can be." After 18 hours, the doctor emerged from the bedroom, his face grave. "Mr. Zimmerman, there are complications. The baby is in distress and your wife is exhausted." XZ's face paled. Can you save them?" "I'm doing everything I can," the doctor assured him, "but you should prepare yourself." Those were the darkest hours of XZ's life. Waiting outside the bedroom door, listening to Tabitha's weakening cries and the doctor's urgent instructions to Catherine, who was assisting. When silence finally fell, XZ thought his heart would stop. Then came a new sound, the thin, angry cry of a newborn. The door opened and the doctor appeared, his shirt sleeves rolled up and his vest stained with blood. But he was smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Zimmerman. A strong one from the sound of him. And Tabitha, exhausted, but she'll recover. She lost a lot of blood, but she's young and healthy. With proper care, she'll be fine." XZ sagged against the wall in relief. "Can I see them?" Catherine appeared behind the doctor, holding a small bundle. "Meet your son, XZ." The baby was red-faced and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair like his father's. XZ took him carefully, awe spreading across his features as tiny fingers curled around his thumb. "He's perfect," he whispered. "Tabitha's asking for you," Catherine said softly. "She needs to know that he's well." XZ carried his son into the bedroom where Tabitha lay, pale but awake, her eyes anxious. "He's beautiful," XZ assured her, placing the baby in her arms. "Strong and healthy." Tabitha examined her son with trembling hands, counting fingers and toes, checking his breathing, her face a mixture of love and lingering fear. "He'll be all right," she whispered, half question, half statement. "Yes," XZ promised, sitting beside her on the bed. "We all will." They named him Samuel, after Tabitha's father. Unlike her previous babies, Samuel thrived, growing stronger each day. Tabitha watched him anxiously for the first weeks, barely sleeping as she monitored his every breath. XZ would often find her standing over the cradle in the middle of the night, just watching their son sleep. "He's not going anywhere, Tabby," he would say gently, using the nickname that only he was allowed. "Come back to bed." "I can't help it," she would reply. "Part of me is still waiting for something to go wrong." But nothing did. Samuel passed his first month, then his second, growing plumper and more alert by the day. As spring returned to the mountains, Tabitha's fear began to recede, replaced by a cautious joy. Catherine visited often, delighting in her role as aunt. Even James came once, awkwardly presenting a small silver rattle for the baby. "Brooks," XZ acknowledged, shaking the man's hand with more cordiality than Tabitha had expected. "Zimmerman," James replied, equally stiff but making the effort. "Mrs. Zimmerman, the child looks well." "He is," Tabitha confirmed, deciding that, for Samuel's sake, she would attempt to mend the relationship with her brother-in-law. "Would you like to hold him?" The look of panic on James's face almost made her laugh. "Perhaps. Another time." By Samuel's first birthday, the tensions of the past had largely faded. Tabitha's sewing business had grown to include most of Park City's prominent families, and XZ, horse breeding operation was prospering. They added a room to the ranch house and talked of having another child. "Are you sure?" XZ asked one night as they lay together in bed. "Samuel is healthy, but I know how much the fear still haunts you." Tabitha considered the question seriously. "I am afraid," she admitted. "But I'm more afraid of letting that fear control our lives. I want Samuel to have siblings if we're blessed with them." XZ kissed her softly. "Whatever you want, Tabby, but know this: Samuel is more than enough for me. You are more than enough." In the spring of 1881, Tabitha gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth Catherine. Like her brother, she was healthy and strong, with her mother's green eyes and her father's determined chin. Two perfect children, XZ marveled, watching Tabitha nurse their daughter while Samuel, now a sturdy toddler, played with wooden blocks on the floor. "Who would have thought it possible, given where we started?" Tabitha smiled up at him, her face serene in a way it had never been during her first marriage. "You did. You believed in me when no one else would." "I saw the truth," XZ corrected her, "that you were never cursed, just heartbroken and alone." "Not anymore," Tabitha said softly, reaching for his hand. "Never again." As the years passed, the Zimmerman family thrived. They added a third child, another boy they named Theodore after Mr. Blackburn, who had become a close family friend. Park City grew and changed as the mines continued to produce wealth, and XZ's business interests expanded to include a share in the bank and several commercial properties on Main Street. Robert Wilson came to Park City once, in 1885, apparently drawn by rumors of the silver boom. Tabitha encountered him on Main Street, Samuel's hand in hers and Elizabeth perched on XZ's shoulders. For a moment, their eyes met, and Tabitha saw the shock of recognition, followed by confusion as he took in her healthy children. She nodded politely and continued on her way, feeling nothing but a distant pity for the man who had once been the center of her world. He left town the following day without approaching her, on their 10th wedding anniversary. XZ presented Tabitha with a silver locket containing miniature portraits of their 3 children. 10 years, he mused as they sat on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching the sunset as they had on the day he proposed. "Did you ever think, that day you arrived in Park City, that this would be your life?" Tabitha leaned against his shoulder, the locket warm against her skin. "Never. I thought my life was over, that I was condemned to be forever known as that cursed woman who lost her babies. And now—" She smiled, thinking of their children asleep inside, of the life they had built together, of the love that had grown deeper and stronger with each passing year. "Now I know the truth," she said. "That sometimes what looks like a curse is really just life clearing the way for a blessing." XZ kissed the top of her head, his arms around her as night fell over the mountains they both called home. "Not cursed," he murmured. "Not to me, never to me."